And I got to say, this guy, I mean, he must not have watched enough like crime drama television series or movies. I mean, dude, pull the teeth, set the car on fire.
That's right.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a podcast about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and, of course, the most important thing, what God's Word says about all of this stuff. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 288. And it's been a long time. Finally, we've got the band back together. The Pistol Packin' Padre is here. John Bennett, welcome back.
Thank you, Lloyd. You know, it's been a while. Been thinking a lot. And since the last time we got together, you know, yeah, things are looking dismal in this country, although after Tuesday's elections are looking a little bit better. But, you know,
right?
It's inflation. Grocery stores are, you know, shelves are empty. You know, gas prices are through the roof, and it's really easy to get discouraged. You know, so at times like this, just want you, our audience, to remember, let's go, Brandon.
Exactly.
There's my intro for today.
I love it. All of that and Biden pooping himself in front of the Pope. So I mean, good Lord,
he poops himself in front of the Pope. He falls asleep during his speech at the climate summit.
Did you see that weird picture of him? They call it the family photo with all the heads of state together. They do that group photo, and he's like off to the right somewhere.
No, I didn't see that.
He's more than an arm's length away from the nearest person, off screen to the left.
Maybe he was trying to social distance.
Maybe he pooped himself and he didn't want anybody to know.
Or he pooped himself, everybody else knew, and they didn't want to smell it.
But maybe they all took a step to the left just before. Maybe that's what it was.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, we haven't been together for a while, so I thought we would wrestle some jimmies today. Possibly. Who knows? Discussing vigilantism and how Christians should be thinking about it with everything that's gone on this week. Before we do, though, I do want to give a shout out and a thank you to the men and women who make this show possible, the men and women who are members of the Reformation Gun Club. And specifically this week, big shout outs to Brad from Hartford, Wisconsin, Dallas from Severance, Colorado, Kenneth from Sugarland, Texas, Dan from Indian Trail, North Carolina, Mark from St. Paul, Minnesota, Daniel from Chehalis, Washington, and the disreputable Bartlett, who is as disreputable as ever. Thank you all so much for your support. We really do appreciate it during these crazy, the Bidenomics times. Really do appreciate your support. Folks, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means that we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We rely on these awesome people to keep the lights on, keep things going. If you would like to join them for as little as $1 a month, get access to all of the great benefits, and help support the show, visit armedlutheran.us/gun club and check out all the details there, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, so let the Jimmy rustling begin. You may recall last year, almost this time last year, I guess it was, a little more than a year ago, young Kyle Rittenhouse at the time was 17 and found himself carrying an AR-15 in the midst of the riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and was forced to shoot 3 rioters who had attacked him, killing 2. Kyle's murder trial began this week. It's hard to believe it's been a year already. That was episode 233 when we commented on that. It's been forever.
It's been a while.
And that, yeah, it drew some let's say, heated responses from those who disagreed with our take, that while Kyle was definitely in the right in defending himself, he shouldn't have been there, and we shouldn't be lionizing him for killing people in defense of property, even if those people were scumbags.
Right. Well, and I think my attitude has softened a little bit towards him. Obviously, he shot people in defense of his own personal safety at that point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was prepared to. I don't know if he's prepared to use lethal force in protection of private property, but it seemed like that was his purpose for being there. But he also committed himself to public service. He was cleaning up graffiti and trying to render first aid to people who had been injured and that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I don't think our opinions in general have changed. I mean, I don't think he committed murder. I don't think he should go to prison for what happened. I don't think it was smart going there, and I think our opinions on that are pretty much the same as they were a year ago.
I guess I would say, to clarify, I feel a little more sympathetic towards him than I did previously. Just because this guy's been dealing with this for a year and a half now?
Yeah, about 14 months, and people have, and the media particularly, have been quite nasty towards him. So yeah, I'm not as hard on him as I was. I just don't think what he did was a good idea.
Right.
But we're not revisiting that incident today. What we're getting into today is an interesting story out of Washington State. Now, this one comes to us by way of KIRO Channel 7 in Spokane. Police in Spokane made an arrest October 29th in a case involving sex trafficking. Let me say that again 3 times. In a case involving sex trafficking in Seattle and the murder of a 19-year-old man who was beaten and stabbed after being tied up and put into the trunk of a car. In October 2020, so about the time poor Kyle was just getting himself into trouble, 60-year-old John Eisenman discovered that his underage daughter's boyfriend had allegedly sold her into a sex trafficking organization in Seattle for $1,000. Eisenman traveled to Seattle and rescued and returned his daughter to Spokane that same month. In November 2020, just a month later, Spokane police believe Eisenman learned that the boyfriend, 19-year-old Aaron Sorensen, would be in Airway Heights west of Spokane. Police said Eisenman confronted Sorensen where he zip-tied him and put him into the trunk of a car. Court documents say that Eisenman threw a cinder block at Sorensen's head and stabbed him several times in the stomach, killing him. Sorensen's body was left in the trunk. This is the weirdest part of the story, is how they found it.
Yeah.
Left in the trunk, and the car was abandoned north of Spokane County for nearly a year. It was just last month that police believe a third party, apparently without knowing that there was a year-old dead body in the trunk. I don't know how you could drive the car back to Spokane and not know there was something seriously wrong. Maybe this is why they abandoned it, because they left it on East Everett Avenue in Spokane. Maybe they figured, man, this car is funky. I'm done, and they just dropped it and left.
This is one of those cases where I'd love to have, if we have any, of course, Sergeant Bill has experience in law enforcement, but any, crime scene investigators, medical examiners, how much does a body still smell after 1 year? That's what I'd like to know.
After a year in a trunk, yeah, that'd be curious to know. Did it stink so bad that, on the drive home, they're just like, is that you? Did you do that? I can just hear the conversations.
Pot is legal in Washington, so maybe they were just blitzed out of their minds on weed.
And didn't notice, right? On October 22nd, just a little over a week ago, Spokane police received calls from another party that discovered the body in the trunk while they were rummaging through the abandoned car. So the original people found it, drove it to Spokane, left it on the street, and some third party then started rummaging through the car and found the dead body. Spokane, and it doesn't explain how they make the connection, whether this was Eisenman's car or whether he left some telltale evidence, but the police arrested Eisenman on first-degree murder. So, here's a taste of the reactions to this story as collected by John Sexton over at hotair.com. Good luck finding a jury to convict that hero, said one person. Justified homicide, as far as I'm concerned, said another. No crime here. This guy's a hero. Give him a medal. I see nothing wrong. Not all heroes wear capes. Those were kind of the responses in general to this story. Before we get into the specifics and dig into this a little further, let's look at this from a biblical perspective. What does the Bible say about vigilantes and vigilantism? Because one of the common arguments that you and I are always trying to debunk is this confusion by, the anti-gun people. They confuse self-defense and vengeance, and we talk about that quite a bit on the show. This guy, clearly, this was not self-defense. This is vengeance. This is what the Bible warns us against, right?
Right, yeah. This, in accord with God's word, vengeance is not acceptable. And St. Paul writes this, I think it's Romans chapter 12, where he says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord," which is, he's quoting a passage in Deuteronomy. And the idea is that it is the responsibility of the state to bear the sword. And I mean, I get it. There are plenty of times where it seems as if justice is not served. I think of the case of O.J. Simpson, perfect example, where a guy committed premeditated murder. He even wrote a book basically saying, well, I really didn't do it, but if I was going to do it, here's why and here's how.
Right. Not saying I did it, but yeah, I did it.
So it's it's pretty clear from the scriptures that vengeance is not permissible for the Christian. And the reason that we could, aside from the fact that the scriptures tell us that vengeance is the responsibility of God himself, that your life is not in jeopardy, the lives of others are not in jeopardy. Now, an argument could be made that if someone is permitted to go free, that then they are placing the lives of others in jeopardy. They say lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, but, when it comes to those who are convicted criminals, there is no shortage of repeat offenders.
Particularly sex criminals.
Yes. So now, there perhaps may be an argument to be made that if the state refuses to exercise judgment, that it may be permissible for an individual.
That was a question I was going to pose, because the story doesn't really give us a whole lot of detail about what happened between the daughter being abducted and dad going all Liam Neeson on the guy.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say he went Liam Neeson on the guy, because Liam Neeson would have done a better job of covering up his crime.
Well, that's true.
Well, let me rephrase that. The real Liam Neeson, the actor Liam Neeson, is probably too much of a wuss to even do such a thing. The person that he portrays on screen
in the movies, in the Taken movies, yes,
right. So, and that's a very gray area, I would say, to say that perhaps an argument might be made where it could be permissible for one to quote unquote, seek vengeance. I wouldn't say seek vengeance, but to exercise judgment where the state has failed to do so. And this might be an area where perhaps the doctrine of the lesser magistrate might play into it. But by and large, we have this this command in Scripture to be subject to the governing authorities. And I quoted Paul earlier, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." A chapter later in Romans 13, he says that rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil, and that it is the state, we would say, rulers who do not bear the sword in vain, that they are God's ministers to execute wrath on those who practice evil. So it's not our place.
Right.
It's you have a very difficult time trying to make an argument from the Scriptures that a person is justified in exercising judgment upon someone else without having the authority of the state behind them in doing so.
Right.
But again,
the Bible
it's a gray
does say
area.
something, right? And the Bible does say something about an eye for an eye too, though, right?
Yeah, it does. There was this guy named Jesus.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. And he did talk about an eye for an eye, but, he didn't really mention it the way that the person
Moses
who
did?
Yeah. It's and this comes from Matthew chapter 5, and it's not the only place where Jesus references this, but in Matthew chapter 5 he says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." And this is one of the texts that I would say in the early days of the podcast, we've discussed this passage, because this is one of the passages that I would say either well-intentioned or buffoonish liberal Christians have tried to use to argue against the exercise of the Second Amendment in self-defense. This is basically Jesus saying, well, if somebody insults you, don't return the insult. Jesus makes it very clear that you're not to repay evil for evil. In fact, that's another passage that comes to mind. You have to give me a second. I just created some editing work because this just came to you off the top of my head.
Darn it.
I want to make sure that I'm quoting this accurately. I got to find. I'm sorry. You know what?
No.
Just make a note about the 17 and a half minute mark, Pastor Bennett.
Yep, I put a marker in.
Okay. So, the passage that comes to mind here also, and again from Romans, Paul says, repay no one evil for evil. And so it's very difficult, nigh impossible, to make an argument that vengeance is justifiable by the Word of God. I think the closest you could possibly come to would be in the Old Testament. You have the covenant law, and the reference is, it's in Joshua, I believe it's also in Deuteronomy, about the cities of refuge, where the manslayer is the term that's used, depending on the translation. In other words, the person who unintentionally kills someone, that it is permissible under that Jewish law, then if you were to find this person outside of a city of refuge, you could exercise vengeance on them. But
Right.
again, you have to be very limber to make that kind of a stretch to say that it's justifiable then. And I'm certainly not that limber. So wish I were. I can't touch my toes if I'm standing up straight without bending my knees. So
And I don't think there are any cities of refuge in the Spokane area either.
No. There's probably, certainly cities of wrath and destruction. Certainly cities where you wouldn't be, neighborhoods where you wouldn't want to be walking down a dark alley at night.
Well, they used to have Chaz.
Yes.
You could have gone there.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's... And I got to say, this guy, he must not have watched enough, crime drama television series or movies. I mean, dude, pull the teeth, set the car on fire.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of an eye for an eye, if you were going to go there, what he should have done was kidnap the kid and sell him into slavery.
Right.
That would have been proper eye for an eye.
Yeah. And there is the sinful nature wants to give this guy the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's the Medal of Freedom. That's the one that they give to civilians.
Right.
But at the same time, I think the only medal that he wins in this case is one for stupidity. But it's, and this guy would be far better off if, he called 911, said, I confronted the guy and I just lost it. And he would be going down for a crime of passion or manslaughter.
Right.
Rather than now being faced with a first-degree murder charge.
Right, exactly. And based on, if you read all the responses like the ones we saw, what I mentioned earlier, and some things that I've read in other articles, and just, from a human standpoint, those reactions are, and his actions even, are in a way understandable. Maybe
Absolutely.
You don't condone them, but you can understand the anger. You and I are both fathers of daughters. I cannot imagine that predicament. So I think we can understand the anger that drove him to commit those acts.
Right. Well, and it's, as a father of two daughters, yes, I can fully sympathize with his wrath. In fact, it's funny that we're talking about this because it was just this last weekend I was over at my in-laws' place, and somehow the subject of people doing terrible things to men's daughters came up, and I don't even remember what the context was of that. And I said something to the effect of, there's plenty of places out in the country to hide a body. And my father-in-law said, son, you won't have anything to do with that. You'll let me take care of it and no one will ever know. So, yeah.
Yep. And this is a perfectly normal human way of kind of thinking about this thing. We've talked about this sort of hoorah attitude when criminals, get their just desserts in the past. And this is why we cheer for Liam Neeson's character and Brandon Lee in The Crow or Charles Bronson in Death Wish. We want to see the bad guy get what's coming to him.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this, you talked about rustling some jimmies today, and perhaps this will rustle some even further. There is this part of our inner selves that wants to rejoice when we see wicked men get their just desserts. It's how many people celebrated the killing of bin Laden.
Right.
And there's a part of me that just wants to rejoice in that. But then we come across passages like Ezekiel 33, where it says, and this is God speaking through Ezekiel to his people, say to them, as I live, says the Lord, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his evil way and live. Turn from your evil ways, for why should you die, O house of Israel? And what we take away from that is that our God mourns the death of the wicked, for they perish eternally in eternal hellfire and separation from the God who created them in his image.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though, yes, we can say that it is a good thing that a scumbag like Osama bin Laden is no longer walking the earth, at the same time we have a God who does not take pleasure in his death, for that death led to eternal damnation. And so as children of God, we should try, as difficult as it is, as much as the sinful nature doesn't want to let us do this, we should not rejoice in the death of the wicked. Rather, we should understand that this is a person who has perished eternally, and we shouldn't desire the eternal damnation of others, even though the sinful nature says it is a good thing.
Right. You know, we've talked about this in the past. When the home invader gets shot, we mourn the loss of that life because for the reasons that you just laid out, because every life is precious and that person was created in God's image. But we also recognize that home invader or Osama bin Laden got what was coming to them: live by the sword, die by the sword.
Right.
We celebrate that lives were saved, like when the homeowner, blows the home invader away, but we don't celebrate the death of the criminal.
Right. Even though the sinner in us wants to rejoice, yeah.
Even though we want to.
Right.
So what should this guy have done? And we talk about this. Let's talk about the this, not necessarily the theological thing, but what's the legal thing? And the smart thing? You said, as you pointed out, that he did something that wasn't smart. What should he have done?
Well, this really seems like it was a knee-jerk, spontaneous act of violence. And it's one of those things where if you are really pissed off about something that someone has done, why don't you wait till you're a little bit cooler before you talk to them? Because just think of the outcome. If this father, knowing what this piece of excrement had done to his daughter, had instead reported this to the authorities mm-hmm. arrested the guy and got his cooperation to turn on this sex trafficking ring. How many more young girls could have been saved from that if instead this father had done the right thing?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of, I think there's three reasons why we should not be celebrating what this guy did. And one is, of course, what you just mentioned is, okay, so he took out the low guy on the rung, right? The lowest rung on the ladder, who's selling people into this sex slavery ring. Now you've knocked that guy out, or knocked him off the board. How do you that makes it a little harder for us to get if we had arrested him, it would have been easier to get the rest of that organization. They're still operating. They don't care about that guy who's, now dead in the back of a car in Spokane County. They're off. They're still operating.
Yeah, they got another half dozen guys to take his place and keep bringing them girls.
Yep, exactly.
And the guy who gets $1,000 for a girl, selling her into a sex trafficking ring, that truly is the low guy on the totem pole.
Yeah, he's not high in the pecking order.
Right.
The second argument against this is kind of a societal argument, I think, and that is: do we really? I know we all want this guy to go free, right? But do we really want a society where people just take the law into their own hands and commit murder based on their own reasoning? I mean, that's how we got the Ahmaud Arbery murder, right? Those three guys decided to take the law in their own hands and ended up killing him. What if this kid that he killed wasn't really the bad guy? What if he had it wrong? What if the daughter was maybe he got the wrong information, or maybe he got the wrong guy. What if, and like you say, what if they had left that guy alive and arrested him and then used him to get the rest of the ring? We've got a guy who's now taken the law into his own hands. And do we want that in society in general?
No, it's, that would lead to chaos and anarchy. Think for a moment right now with the current political climate in our country, where we have a specific demographic that is saying that people who think like you and me, and I would argue probably 95% or better of our audience, that we are evil people because we hold to certain principles. Mm-hmm. If we had this, this vengeance go rampant, I'm trying to think of a term, but it's not coming to mind. Anyway, if we allow this to happen, where anybody could take vengeance on those who they perceive as evildoers, you and I could wind up dead because some whack job liberal who thinks that we are evil because we hold to certain principles would see it as a good thing if they killed us.
Right.
I mean, this would be giving a carte blanche permissibility to people like, Antifa or Black Lives Matter to do whatever the heck they want without any well, what am I saying? Look at what happened, a year ago. They had no consequences for their actions, but
well, that's true.
Yeah. But
that's the whole eye for an eye and the world goes blind argument, right?
Yeah.
And it's true. If you allow that, and if that's really what we want, where do you really want that to? Because where that ultimately leads is not pleasant for anyone.
Right.
We're next on the list.
Right.
The third thing, and I think this is the bigger argument for us as Christians, is to look at the vocation of father, right? The primary role of the father is to protect the family, to protect their children. That's number one job requirement of a father, right? They make sure your kids survive to adulthood. That's the number one. But some would argue that that's what this is. Killing this guy is protecting his daughter. But is it really? I mean, I don't mean to sound callous, but the daughter was already abducted and abused. The father protected her by going and rescuing her. But now he's under arrest and facing a first-degree murder charge. And so he's not there to protect her because he's sitting in jail.
Right.
And if he's convicted, he'll never be able to protect her again. Right.
Well, at least not for the next, 10 to 20 years or whatever kind of sentence he gives he gets. That's really the tragedy in this. It's, pardon me if I don't shed any tears, assuming this kid that he killed, this 19-year-old kid, was indeed the perpetrator. For all we know, it could have been his buddy that did this, not him himself. If he was indeed the perpetrator, the sinner in me isn't going to shed any tears over him. Right. But the tragedy is that this father is no longer in a position to help his daughter recover from this very tragic experience in her life.
Right, and to pile on top of the trauma that she suffered of being a sex slave, is now she doesn't have her dad, and she is going through her dad's murder trial, which is just going to compound the problems for her, I would think. So, what do you expect is going to happen here? What do you think will happen?
Well, if
not what you want to have happen, but what do you think?
Yeah,
I mean,
we've already surmised that this guy isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. So I would say, hopefully, his attorney is a little sharper than he is, and he pleads to a lesser charge. Mm-hmm. If this goes to trial, we're looking at. I I doubt you will. Yes, you have the people saying that you'll never find a jury who will convict this guy, but we've seen plenty of juries that have been as impartial as they possibly could have in cases like these.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance if this goes to trial, the guy ends up doing, 10 to 20 years.
Some amount of time. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have any prior convictions from what I understand. He's not got a violent crime history or anything like that. I'll be surprised. I suspect they'll have a hard time initially finding an impartial jury because there'll be people with very strong feelings about this sort of thing. It's going to be hard. You put a parent, especially a parent of a daughter, on that jury, it's going to be really hard for a lot of people to be impartial. I think they will ultimately, but I think it's going to take a while for them to impanel a jury. Once they do, I wouldn't be surprised if either, like you say, he pleads out to something lesser or he's given a fairly light sentence comparatively based on what's happened. It's not like this is the axe murderer who, is or the serial killer. I think he's going to get convicted of something, and it's probably not going to be as bad as, it's not going to be good going to prison, but it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be life or anything like that. I think he'll get a fairly light sentence would be my guess.
I'm thinking if he does the smart thing, if he says, okay, his lawyer pitches a plea of 5 to 7 years for third-degree murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? This isn't the guy that's going to be worried about dropping the soap in prison because he's going to be treated like a hero. There's this funny thing about people in prison that they tend to not have a very high opinion of those who engage in crimes against women. Even though, let's face it, there's a lot of guys in prison for crimes against women. But it's the worst thing that can happen for...
Crimes against children,
yes,
they have absolutely no patience for.
Right.
This guy took somebody out, they're going to be like, hey, he's one of us. He's cool.
Right. Yeah, the worst thing for a pedophile or a rapist when they serve their time is if the other guys in the prison find out why they're in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, I suspect it's going to be a lighter sentence, of course, unless the scumbag boyfriend was black, and then he's going to get 30 days in the electric chair, probably.
Yeah. Well, I think Washington abolished the death penalty, so I think you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think it'd be good.
Oh, man. They might reinstate it just for him if indeed the guy was black.
Yeah. That's usually the way it works.
Yeah.
All right. I think that wraps it up. I think that covers it pretty well. Folks, if you have any questions or any comments about anything we said here, if we rustled your jimmies and you really want to give us a piece of your mind, we'd love to hear from you. Visit our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. Leave us a voicemail or a voice message. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Even if you hate what you heard, we would still love to hear your thoughts. As long as they're polite, we'll respond to them on the air. Pastor, thank you so much for doing this. It's great to get back together.
Absolutely. Glad we could do this again.
All right. Next week, I think we're going to break the regular schedule. And we have, I discovered in researching this article today, I found something interesting related to the Supreme Court case, the Second Amendment case that is being discussed this week at the Supreme Court, and it involves our good friends at the ELCA. So,
you said we would friends,
friends in air quotes. So I thought we'll dig into that next week. So another Clinging to God and Guns episode next week, just for you awesome people. And we'll laugh at our friends, again, our quote unquote friends in the ELCA. All right. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.